Ambrosia Sky is a game where you explore an abandoned space colony, clean up an invasive alien fungus, solve environmental puzzles, and occasionally stop to bury the dead, which sound like several completely different games smashed together. But now that its second and final act is here, I think that strange combination is exactly why Ambrosia Sky is worth talking about. If you're familiar with the game, or for those of you new to this game as a whole, you play as Dahlia, returning to her former home after disaster has swept through the colony, armed with essentially a futuristic pressure washer, different chemical compounds, and a tether. Your job is to clear away the fungal infestations that's overtaken. And there's something immediately satisfying about this. You enter a space covered in these strange organisms, slowly figure out how they behave, clean everything away, and watch the environment become recognizable again. There's a lot of puzzle solving in that. It's a very kind of atmospheric environmental puzzle design to the levels. But you're not just restoring these places, you're learning about the people who used to occupy them. And that's where Ambrosia Sky starts becoming something much more interesting than its premise initially suggests. Because every environment is also telling a story. There's a lot of if you've seen my prior video where I got a chance to watch a preview of the game and listen to a Q&A, they talk about a lot of the environmental storytelling that's done for the narrative and for the whole experience. A laboratory isn't simply somewhere to put a puzzle. It's someone worked there, someone that you're learning about. Its living quarters belongs to someone. The objects left behind were left by people that used to use them. And sometimes the person you're learning about is still there waiting to be laid to rest. When I was mentioning earlier, when I listened to the developers talk about Act 2 before its release, they explained that it was actually fundamental to how they designed the game. Instead of starting with a puzzle and building a room around it, they start by asking why this place exists in the first place. I think you can feel that philosophy throughout Ambrosia Sky, Act 1, and even further in Act 2. It creates this real, unusual rhythm where cleaning, exploration, puzzle solving, and storytelling start to become this like organic gameplay loop that just builds it in and of itself when you wouldn't think that those things kind of can lead into each other. Act 2, which is the update that is just released, is kind of pushing those ideas even further. There are new fungal strains to understand, more complicated electrical interactions, exterior traversal, and some really wonderful, strange sections involving unstable gravity. But what I like is that these additions don't suddenly turn Ambrosia Sky into a completely different game. They're mostly new ways of asking you to reconsider tools you already understood. And that confidence is something I noticed when I was examining the preview earlier this year. SoftRain seems much more comfortable designing around these systems they'd already created instead of constantly introducing something new. Now that it's actually here, I think that's one of Act 2's biggest strengths. Although it's also probably where you'll figure out whether this game is for you or not. Because the basic rhythm is deliberately repetitive. You're exploring, you're cleaning, you're investigating, you solve those environmental problems, as I said, and then you deepen the story and the movement forward. I would say I don't think that cleaning alone is necessarily what makes this game compelling. For me, there's this strangely intimate thing about arriving to everything that's already happened and kind of exploring it, and the cleaning is a means to that. I think Dahlia isn't exploring kind of like these untouched alien frontiers. She's returning home. She's returning to her familiar space, and you're walking through these spaces where people lived, worked, argued, loved, and eventually died. And I think there's something really interesting about what the story is doing, what the game is doing, what this team is doing. Learning about them through the gameplay as opposed to larger expositions, I think, is an interesting way to go about it. And I applaud them for approaching this game in that way. I think that's what gives the melancholy of Ambrosia Sky something real. There are moments when cleaning a room feels satisfying and almost like a power wash simulator sort of way. It's like there's a catharsis to it. Like you're like, oh, I had a rough day. I'm just going to do a little bit of cleaning. I don't know. In a weird way, I get a similar vibe when I'm playing this game. And 5 minutes later, you're discovering who lived there, what happened to them, and so on and so forth. So the game keeps moving between those feelings for me of satisfaction, curiosity, and melancholy and grief. And I will say, surprisingly, there's moments of hope as well. It's not like it's not in the grim or anything like that. I think Act Two being kind of the final aspect of this and conclusion to Dahlia's story, particularly everything surrounding Maeve, towards its conclusion. I'm not going to spoil anything or go anywhere near the specifics of that, but I think for fans of the what was in Act One, they'll be happy with how things conclude. I do think that the complete story changes how easy it is to recommend this game. When Act One first released, you were investing in the promise of where this might eventually go, and even though that has changed back and forth a little bit and developed, now you have the whole thing. It's all here. So if you're new, you have a total package. I think that's where this team has made it a really interesting example of indie games understanding exactly what makes a game different when you're committing to an effort like this. It isn't like the biggest science fiction adventure. It doesn't even have the most complex puzzles, but the combination of the pieces sum together into something very mysterious, something that is drawn from memory, and something that lasts with you. So, if you've been curious about Ambrosia Sky, but we're waiting for the complete experience, I think Act 2 now makes this a really good time to finally check it out. And if you've already played it, I'm really curious what ultimately kept you kind of moving forward. Was it the cleaning up of the colony, or the discovering of what's underneath all the fungus, or some combination of both? Until next time, I'll catch you on the next save point.